Peter Falk, the legendary actor known worldwide for his iconic role as Detective Columbo, was no stranger to controversy. Behind the charming, disheveled figure of the world's most famous detective lay a man whose career and personal life were filled with shocking twists, betrayals, and difficult relationships. In this video, we'll reveal the story behind one of Hollywood's most complex stars, as we uncover the 8 actors Peter Falk didn't just dislike, he outright hated. From rivalries to bitter betrayals, Falk's encounters with these actors were filled with drama, and some of them would shape his legacy forever. Stay tuned, because the truth behind these tumultuous relationships is far more shocking than you can imagine. Peter Falk, renowned for his portrayal of the unassuming Detective Columbo, was often perceived as affable and approachable. However, behind the scenes, not all interactions were harmonious. One notable instance involves actor Eddie Albert, best known for his role in the television series Green Acres. Their paths crossed during the filming of a Columbo episode in the early 1970s. Albert guest starred as the antagonist, a role that required intense scenes opposite Falk. From the outset, tension simmered. Albert, a seasoned actor with a disciplined approach, found Falk's improvisational style challenging. Falk's tendency to deviate from the script in pursuit of authenticity often led to extended takes and unexpected dialogue shifts. Albert reportedly grew frustrated with the prolonged shooting schedules and the lack of adherence to the script. He felt that Falk's methods disrupted the flow of scenes and undermined the collaborative process. The situation escalated when Albert allegedly referred to Falk as a real hole, expressing his dissatisfaction with the working conditions. This confrontation was a rare public glimpse into the behind-the-scenes dynamics of Columbo. While Falk's commitment to his craft was undeniable, his approach sometimes clashed with co-stars who preferred a more structured environment. The incident with Albert highlighted the challenges of balancing artistic expression with collaborative harmony. Despite the tension, the episode was completed and aired, receiving positive reviews. However, the experience left a lasting impression on both actors. Albert reportedly declined future opportunities to work on Columbo, and Falk became more aware of the potential impact of his methods on his colleagues. This episode serves as a reminder that even in successful productions, creative differences can lead to significant conflicts. Falk's dedication to his role was both his strength and, at times, a source of friction. The clash with Eddie Albert remains one of the more notable examples of such behind-the-scenes discord. When Suzanne Plesette guest starred on Columbo, many fans anticipated a dynamic pairing. She was charismatic, witty, and seasoned, an actress who brought depth and elegance to every role. On screen, her chemistry with Peter Falk was undeniable. But behind the scenes, it told a different story, one laced with quiet tension and conflicting energies. At first, the collaboration seemed promising. Falk respected Plesette's resume, and she admired the Columbo legacy. But as filming progressed, subtle irritations began surfacing. Falk's unconventional process, his unpredictable line deliveries, insistence on spontaneity, and near-obsessive pursuit of nuance clashed with Plesette's precision and polish. Plesette, trained in stagecraft and timing, often felt thrown off by Falk's tendency to stretch scenes without warning. Where she expected rhythm and structure, Falk brought improvisation and chaos. What should have been creative freedom turned, in her view, into distraction. Off-camera, she was reportedly vocal about her frustrations, not confrontational, but firm. Falk, for his part, wasn't known to take criticism lightly, especially not when it came to his beloved role as Columbo. He felt he was protecting the integrity of the show. Plesette, on the other hand, believed that great acting came from trust and timing, not surprise rewrites during takes. Their professional clash didn't explode into open hostility, but it left a lingering chill. Crew members later described the atmosphere between them as cordial, but stiff. There were no yelling matches, just the unmistakable vibe of two powerful actors operating on very different frequencies. After the episode aired, Plesette didn't return for future appearances on Columbo, despite her strong performance. Some say it was mutual. She didn't want to deal with Falk again, and Falk preferred working with actors who adapted more easily to his style. In interviews years later, Plesette never trashed Falk publicly, but her comments were telling. She described working on Columbo as challenging in ways I hadn't expected, a carefully worded nod to their strained experience. For fans who love them on screen, it's a surprising revelation, proof that chemistry doesn't always mean compatibility. And this wasn't the only time Falk's method caused friction. Another actor took the tension even further. turning creative disagreements into personal resentment. When Robert Conrad walked onto the Columbo set, he didn't come quietly. Known for his tough guy image from the Wild Wild West, Conrad wasn't just another guest star, he was a force. Confident, sharp, and deeply serious about his craft, he expected respect and control. But Peter Falk, the king of quirky improvisation and last-minute changes, wasn't about to hand that over without a fight. From day one, the tension was electric. Conrad was a no-nonsense performer. He liked preparation, clear direction, and sticking to the script. Falk, meanwhile, treated the script like a loose sketch. He tweaked dialogue constantly, rewrote scenes in the middle of shooting, and made choices that felt spontaneous and unpredictable. To fans, that made Columbo a genius. But to a guy like Conrad, it was chaos. They butted heads almost immediately. Falk would push for multiple takes, playing with his delivery to find the perfect nuance. Conrad saw that as wasting time and undermining the flow. He didn't want to play through a scene, he wanted to master it. According to those who watched it unfold, their exchanges off-camera got sharp. Not yelling, but curt. Cold. Professionals with clashing worldviews. It wasn't just about method, it was about pride. Falk saw Columbo as his house, and anyone stepping into it had to respect his process. Conrad saw himself as a heavyweight who didn't need to be micromanaged by a co-star. The result? A working relationship that was strained at best, explosive at worst. The episode got finished, but it wasn't smooth. Rumors floated that Conrad refused to return for retakes unless Falk agreed to certain conditions. He reportedly told one crew member that working on Columbo was like playing chess with someone who keeps moving the pieces after your turn. It was the kind of jab Falk didn't forget. Years later, when asked about the experience, Falk didn't speak directly about Conrad. But he made a pointed comment about some guest stars bringing their own storm onto the set, a quote many believe was aimed directly at him. Conrad, in his typical straight-shooting fashion, said the show was Peter's ride. You either held on or got thrown off. He chose to get off. What made this clash so memorable wasn't just the personalities, it was the sheer magnitude of the energy between them. Both men were stars in their own right, but put together, their styles combusted. It was one of the rare moments when Columbo's charm nearly got derailed by ego. Peter Falk and George C. Scott weren't just two actors crossing paths, they were two towering presences with history. Early in their careers, they ran in similar circles, both clawing their way up through theater and television. They shared mutual respect, even admiration. So when Scott joined Columbo for a guest appearance, many expected fireworks, in the best possible way. Instead, what they got was a cold, uneasy reunion that left everyone scratching their heads. George C. Scott was intense. Famous for his portrayal of General Patton, he brought an almost military seriousness to every role. His standards were legendary, and so was his unwillingness to suffer fools, or what he perceived as sloppy work. Peter Falk, though brilliant, didn't operate with that kind of rigidity. His genius was in the chaos, the offbeat rhythm, the messiness. And for Scott, that wasn't just frustrating, it was insulting. What started as friendly banter turned into veiled digs. Falk would deviate from the script mid-scene, throwing Scott off. Scott, who valued precision above all, began reacting with icy stares and clipped replies. Falk, in turn, saw the coldness as arrogance and started pushing further, leaning into his improvisation like a provocation. It became a silent standoff, with neither willing to bend. Things got so tense that by the third day of filming, the director reportedly had to mediate between them. Not over yelling or dramatic confrontations, but a total communication breakdown. They weren't talking unless the cameras were rolling. For two actors who once shared laughs in green rooms and backstage lounges, the silence was deafening. Crew members later recalled that Scott seemed genuinely disappointed, not just irritated. He had expected a joyful reunion, a chance to work with an old friend on one of the most acclaimed detective series on TV. But Falk's unorthodox approach, which others found charming, struck Scott as careless. He felt let down, and that sense of betrayal added to the tension. Falk, for his part, wasn't interested in smoothing things over. He believed in his method and didn't appreciate being judged for it. To him, Scott was being uptight and inflexible. It became a matter of pride, and Falk never backed down when his pride was on the line. After the episode wrapped, they didn't speak again. No public fallout, no dramatic interviews, just a once promising friendship that quietly froze over. When Scott was asked about his Columbo experience years later, he paused, then simply said, "It wasn't what I expected." That said everything. But while Scott drifted away, another actor would soon come in with a different kind of energy. Charming, charismatic, but with a dark undercurrent that Falk couldn't ignore. And this next encounter would leave everyone stunned. On paper, Patrick McGuan was a dream guest star. The star of The Prisoner and Danger Man, McGuan was sharp, philosophical, and bold, a creative force who could match Peter Falk's intelligence and improvisational genius beat for beat. But when the two teamed up for multiple Columbo episodes, their chemistry didn't just sparkle. It caught fire in ways that burned both of them. McGuan didn't come in to play a role, he came to make a statement. He wasn't content just delivering lines. He wanted to direct, write, reshape characters. He wanted control. And Peter Falk, who saw Columbo as his baby, wasn't about to let someone else take the wheel. What followed was a power struggle wrapped in polite conversations, quiet standoffs, and a constant battle of wills behind the scenes. What made their tension so unique was that it was rarely loud or obvious. On set, they were professional, even charming toward each other. But underneath, there was a persistent friction. Falk would offer a scene direction. McGuan would challenge it. McGuan would propose a dramatic shift in tone. Falk would push back. It was two masterminds circling each other, both unwilling to yield. Still, their episodes together were undeniably brilliant. The tension bled into the screen in the best way. Falk once referred to McGuan as the only guy who could out-Columbo, a backhanded compliment that said it all. He admired the man's skill, but couldn't stand the way he tried to dominate the set. Things came to a head when McGuan directed one of the episodes he also starred in. Falk clashed with his directing style, calling it deliberate to a fault. He hated how long takes dragged, how McGuan would demand extra rehearsals, and how little room was left for Falk's signature improvisation. Falk wasn't used to being told how to play Columbo. And having McGuan in both the director's chair and in front of the camera made it all the more infuriating. But it wasn't just artistic tension. Behind the scenes, rumors swirled of McGuan's intense moods and isolationist behavior. He reportedly spent long hours alone, rewriting scenes, or pacing in his trailer. Some speculated he was dealing with deeper personal struggles. Others thought he was just eccentric. Falk, however, grew increasingly impatient. He wasn't interested in unraveling the mystery, he just wanted to shoot the show without walking on eggshells. Despite everything, they collaborated more than once. Why? Because the end product was gold. Falk knew genius when he saw it, even if it came wrapped in chaos. But it's no coincidence they eventually stopped working together. The friction became too much, too exhausting. Still, McGuan wasn't the only one who brought fire to the Columbo set. The next actor on Falk's hidden blacklist wasn't confrontational, but left Falk deeply disturbed for a very different reason. Lawrence Harvey had a face made for the screen, elegant, refined, and unreadable. A British actor known for his work in The Manchurian Candidate, Harvey brought a razor-sharp presence to Columbo. But while his performance was chillingly effective, Peter Falk found the experience of working with him unsettling, even a bit eerie. The tension with Harvey wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, creeping, and psychological. Falk thrived on energy reactions, chemistry, real-time sparks that made his improvisation shine. Harvey, on the other hand, was calculated. He delivered his lines like chess moves, each word carefully measured, every glance loaded with ambiguity. Falk struggled to connect with him. There was no rhythm, no bounce back. Just silence between the lines. What frustrated Falk the most was Harvey's complete lack of collaboration. He wasn't rude or aggressive. He simply didn't engage. When Falk would suggest tweaking a scene, Harvey would nod but say nothing. When directors asked for more spontaneity, Harvey gave a flat, "I don't think so." It wasn't arrogance, it was detachment. Falk described it as acting into a vacuum, like throwing a punch underwater. There were whispers on set that Harvey preferred to be left alone. Some said he thought of television work as beneath him. Others believed he was simply too consumed with his own internal process to bother with small talk or bonding. Either way, it left Falk feeling isolated during filming. For a show like Columbo, where the push and pull between detective and suspect drives the episode, that lack of connection hurt. But that wasn't all. Falk later admitted he found Harvey's demeanor deeply uncomfortable. There was something about the way he watched people, too closely, too quietly. It made everyone around him feel like they were being studied. Some called it brilliant acting. Falk called it unnerving. And for a guy who built a career out of breaking down suspects with charm and wit, Harvey's blank mask was the one face he couldn't crack. To make things worse, Harvey's off-screen behavior did little to ease the discomfort. He was elusive, disappearing between takes and declining all social invites. Unlike most guest stars who grab dinner or drinks after shooting, Harvey vanished the moment the cameras stopped. Falk joked once that Harvey might actually be one of his own Columbo villains, charming in public, chilling in private. Despite the friction, the episode remained a fan favorite. Harvey delivered a performance that still gets praised for its intensity, but Falk never forgot the feeling. He later said that working with Harvey was like trying to dance with someone who's not even listening to the music. That haunting stillness stayed with him. And as strange as Harvey was, the next actor Falk clashed with would bring a storm far louder and far messier than anything he dealt with before. Among all the actors Peter Falk worked with, few left a deeper emotional mark than Gina Rollins. She wasn't just another performer. She was a legend in her own right, a frequent collaborator of her husband John Cassavetes, and a master of raw emotional acting. Falk and Rollins had worked together before, and there was a deep respect between them. But that respect didn't shield their time on set from becoming unexpectedly tense. The trouble wasn't traditional. Rollins wasn't aggressive, argumentative, or a control freak. She wasn't difficult in the usual sense. Instead, she challenged Falk on a different level, emotionally, creatively, and even spiritually. Her style was completely vulnerable. She brought everything to the surface: grief, love, rage, confusion. And when she performed opposite Falk, she pulled things out of him that he didn't always want to show. To put it simply, she held up a mirror, and Falk wasn't ready for what it reflected. During one project, Rollins improvised a particularly intense scene that threw Falk off completely. Not because it was unprofessional, but because it was too real. She exposed cracks in Falk's own emotional armor. He prided himself on control and instinct. But with Rollins, there was no hiding. She wouldn't let him glide through a performance. She made him feel every moment, and sometimes that was too much. The tension grew quietly. There were no screaming matches or walk-offs. Instead, Falk became withdrawn. He was shorter with the crew. He questioned the script more, second-guessed his scenes. Those around him could sense something was off, but they couldn't put their finger on it. It wasn't until much later that Falk admitted Rollins had rattled him. Not out of disrespect, but because she exposed parts of him he didn't want to confront. And yet, the final product was beautiful. Their chemistry on screen crackled. Critics praised their scenes together, calling them electric and painfully human. But behind that brilliance was a deep discomfort. Falk wasn't used to being that raw. And while he admired Rollins for her courage, a part of him resented how vulnerable she made him feel. He never spoke badly about her. He never claimed to hate her. But she was one of the few co-stars who unsettled him, not with conflict, but with truth. That was harder to shake off than any argument. What Rollins brought to the surface lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. And for Falk, it was a reminder that even the most seasoned actors have their limits, especially when confronted by someone who refuses to let them hide. But just as Falk was dealing with emotional exposure, he was about to come face to face with something even harder to handle: betrayal from within his own circle. Peter Falk's relationship with Jack Cassidy was complicated, to say the least. At first, they were close friends, bonded by their shared love for acting and their undeniable chemistry on screen. Jack Cassidy, with his Broadway roots and suave demeanor, was often cast in roles that required charm and menace in equal measure. Falk, on the other hand, was known for his grounded yet brilliant portrayal of the quirky detective Columbo. Their on-screen dynamic was electric, especially in the Columbo episodes where Cassidy played the villain. But what started as a friendly, almost brotherly dynamic between Falk and Cassidy slowly began to unravel. The seeds of tension were planted during one of their Columbo episodes. Falk, always the professional, had a certain way of working, a methodical, almost instinctual approach that revolved around improvisation and subtlety. Cassidy, however, was more theatrical, relying heavily on scripted material and an overtly dramatic style. Their contrasting styles weren't inherently problematic, but it became clear that Cassidy wasn't content with just being the guest star. He wanted more. He wanted power, power on set, power over his role, and perhaps even power over Falk himself. Cassidy began pushing for his character to be written more prominently, demanding more screen time and dramatic moments. This subtle shift in Cassidy's behavior began to create cracks in their friendship. Falk, the ever-friendly, humble actor, wasn't one to engage in overt conflict. But over time, he started to feel the heat of Cassidy's competition. Cassidy's efforts to dominate the role began to chip away at the camaraderie they once had. What was once a collaborative effort between two friends turned into a rivalry that was harder to ignore. Falk found himself in a constant battle to maintain his own integrity as an actor while navigating the growing animosity with Cassidy. What made it more difficult was the betrayal that eventually came to light. Cassidy, who had been so eager to portray a friendly, even supportive figure, began talking behind Falk's back, telling others that he felt underrated and underused in Columbo. This betrayal stung Falk deeply. He had trusted Cassidy, both as a colleague and as a friend, but Cassidy's desire for recognition clouded their once solid bond. Falk didn't publicly address the issue for years. He didn't need to, because the fallout between the two was loud enough in its own right. Cassidy's comments about Falk and Columbo started to make their way into public interviews, sparking a war of words between the two actors. While Falk remained diplomatically silent, the tension was palpable. To add to the drama, Cassidy's increasingly erratic behavior on set only made things worse. Though their professional relationship eventually became strained, it was during a particularly heated argument on set that Falk realized just how far things had gone. Cassidy's comments were no longer passive, they were deeply personal. And while Falk never let the animosity affect his performance, it began to impact him emotionally. The tragic irony here was that the very actor who had once been his trusted friend was now playing an adversary, both on screen and off. It became clear that, despite their past friendship, Falk could no longer view Cassidy as anything but a rival, someone whose thirst for fame and validation led to a complete betrayal of their once strong bond. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but Falk learned a valuable lesson. Even the closest friends can turn into your biggest competition when jealousy and ego come into play. But just when Falk thought he had seen it all, another twist would come in the form of an actor whose talent was undeniable, but whose behavior pushed the limits of professionalism in ways Falk had never anticipated. Peter Falk's career, like the man himself, was never defined by simplicity. His relationships with colleagues, his on-screen persona, and even his personal life were anything but conventional. Through all the challenges, conflicts, and betrayals, Falk managed to create a legacy that remains powerful to this day, one that's as complicated and multifaceted as the characters he portrayed. By the time Falk reached the height of his fame, particularly as the iconic detective Columbo, he had already seen his fair share of both professional and personal turmoil. The betrayals from friends like Jack Cassidy and the emotional trials with Gina Rollins were a part of his complex career journey. But instead of letting these struggles consume him, Falk turned them into fuel for his performances, creating a body of work that has stood the test of time. What makes Falk's story especially compelling is that he never let any single experience, good or bad, define him. The friendships he lost, the conflicts he endured, and even the moments of intense emotional vulnerability served as a backdrop to the character of Columbo, who, despite all odds, always remained calm, collected, and one step ahead. This paradox, Falk the man and Columbo the character, resonated deeply with audiences. People loved Columbo because he embodied traits that Falk himself carried: resilience, sharp wit, humility, and an almost unshakable composure in the face of adversity. Yet, behind the scenes, Falk's life was filled with complexities that would shock many fans. His relationships, especially with the people he worked closest with, were fraught with drama. He had a unique ability to create chemistry with almost every actor he worked with, yet some of those very actors would end up being a source of conflict. Falk's honesty, his refusal to play politics, and his bluntness often led to moments of tension with those who wanted to be seen in a certain light or have more control over their projects. Through it all, Falk never seemed to regret the choices he made. The way he stood firm in his beliefs and career choices might have cost him some friendships and strained his relationships, but it also earned him the respect of countless others in the industry. His work ethic and determination to always push boundaries earned him accolades that have yet to be surpassed. By the time he reached 94, Falk had seen a major shift in Hollywood, a landscape where power plays were more common than true artistry. But even at this advanced age, he never lost his sharpness, his wit, or his ability to reflect on his past with a critical eye. His final years were spent reflecting on not just his successes, but the very human side of his journey. The betrayals, the highs, and the lows, Falk knew that they all contributed to the unique legacy he would leave behind. In the end, the question remains, how will Peter Falk be remembered? Not just as Columbo, but as the man who was more than his roles, more than his controversies, more than his betrayals. He will be remembered as someone who lived his truth unapologetically, someone who, despite the challenges, remained steadfast in his craft and his character. The 8 actors he might have hated were just a small part of the story, a story that will continue to captivate new generations long after the cameras stopped rolling. Peter Falk's career wasn't just defined by his role as Columbo. It was a journey through friendships, rivalries, and the deep complexities of working in the entertainment industry. The actors he had conflicts with might have been some of the most shocking and unexpected, but they reveal the human side of Falk, an actor who was both deeply passionate and unapologetically himself. His legacy is not just in the characters he played, but in the lessons we learned from the challenges he faced. What do you think about Peter Falk's relationships with these 8 actors? Do you think the tension between them was inevitable, or could things have turned out differently? And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Hollywood's most fascinating stars, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this.